All right, welcome back. It's time to talk about everyone's favorite team from North America, Evil Geniuses, and I'm going to be doing a quick little review and preview for this team heading into TI11. Of course, in case you missed it, I've already done previews for 7 other teams on my channel. If you want to check those out, feel free to check the link in the description or the most recent videos on my channel. I have already done Hikori, Talon, Sonics, Entity, BB Team, RNG, and recently Fnatic. So if you're a fan of any of those teams, check those out. Check out the link to our Discord as well in the description. And yeah, let's talk about Evil Geniuses, a team that has had a pretty interesting past DPC season, maybe not the most dominant performance that we were expecting of them, some really inconsistent results, and overall, what are we going to be expecting from EG at this year's International, who is a team that has already kind of underperformed, especially as of late at TI. Let's see how they do. Starting off, let's just take a look at their DPC points. They finish off with a total of 1,052 DPC points, and that is with some deductions for some roster changes this past year. They finished 2nd place in the North American region by points and 11th place internationally. So they qualified to TI11 off of points alone. Taking a look at their roster, which, as I just mentioned, has gone through some minor changes throughout the past year. We, of course, have Arteezy playing the carry role, who his furthest run at a TI has been finishing 3rd place at both TI4 and TI8, both of those with EG. This will be his 8th time attending the International. He is still looking for that grand final appearance, which I'd be really stoked to see if he actually gets there or not, because I feel like Arteezy would play really, really well if he did get there. Playing in mid lane, of course, we have Abed, who his furthest run was actually only ever finishing 9th to 12th place at TI7 with Digital Chaos. He also finished in that position with EG last year at TI10. This will be his 5th International. For Nightfall, this is actually just his 2nd TI, and his furthest run was finishing top 6 last year with Virtus Pro, which was a little bit of a shock that VP didn't end up holding on to him, although given VP's latest results, you know, maybe it was the right move, maybe it wasn't. They, of course, didn't qualify for TI yet, so other than that, though, they have looked pretty dominant. But for Nightfall overall, for a player that kind of started off a little shaky, you know, there was a lot of people that were doubting him, and he had all that missed time at the start of the season too, where MSS was filling in for him, and MSS himself looked really, really good. I had people questioning, you know, maybe they'll just ditch Nightfall and pick up MSS, but overall, Nightfall comes back and he has improved a ton. I think his biggest weakness at the start was definitely that his hero pool was quite small, and it makes a lot of sense. He's playing a new position, so he's not going to have as many heroes at his disposal quite yet, but he has improved quite a bit, and he has carried numerous games for Evil Geniuses this past year. For Crit, of course, this will be his 6th time attending TI. His furthest run ever with at a TI was finishing 3rd place at TI8 with EG. Same thing goes for Fly, who makes his grand return to the position 5 role for this team. This will be his 9th TI for Fly. And finally, taking a look at Coach Boba, who has actually attended pretty much every TI to this point. I accidentally wrote 5 there next to player, but it's only actually 4. His furthest run as a player was finishing 7th and 8th place at TI3 with Team Liquid, and of course as a coach he has won TI back at TI5 with EG, and this will be his 10th time attending TI, his 6th time attending as a coach, as he has already attended 4 times as a player. And of course, the one member no longer on this team that unfortunately didn't work out. There was a lot of hype behind it. You could say the same thing for Fly. When he left the team, he ended up coming back. A lot of hype behind his move, but it didn't end up working out, and that was, of course, Jerax, who currently is not on any team, will not be attending this year's International. Taking a look at the results for EG over this past year, and again, this is where we can kind of take a look at the inconsistency that they've had, which is something a little bit new for Evil Geniuses. Usually these guys have been one of the more dominant forces, not only in their region, but also in overall lands. They've been very consistent over the past few years, and that is just not something we've seen a whole lot from them this past year, and maybe the roster changes are a bit of a tell to why. They actually started things off by almost missing the first major. Had we had one, they would have, but because we had regional finals, they ended up qualifying for finishing top 4. But yeah, they end up finishing 3rd place. They lose their tiebreaker match that would have gotten them top 2. But regardless, after starting off 1 and 2 in the tour, dropping matches to Black and Yellow and Wildcard, yeah, they ended up coming it back, going 5 and 2 total, earning themselves 120 DPC points. And then in the regional finals, they have a fantastic run all the way to the grand finals, where they would eventually lose in 5 games to TSM FTX, but they still earn 130 DPC points. So despite the shaky start, they took advantage of the circumstances with there not being a major in the first tour, and they still come away with 250 DPC points. But what will we see from them next? Well, in Tour 2, they get right back at it. They finish first place in the division after winning some tiebreaker matches. They go 6-1, earning themselves 400 DPC points and a spot at the Stockholm Major, where they would finish absolute dead last. In fact, the only team that finished below them was Mind Games, because they got disqualified partway through the group stage. Yeah, they had a pretty rough time, and even though they were having some success in their own region, they would see fit to part ways with Jerax after the Stockholm Major, where they went 0-2-4 in the group stage. They did not even make it to the main stage. Again, they were the only team that didn't make it to the main stage, other than Mind Games, who I previously mentioned got disqualified. So heading into Tour 3, they got flyback, they part ways with Jerax, and they finished first place again. So again, the region is not an issue, but this past year it has been the LAN. They finished first place, including some tiebreakers. They go 6-1, 500 more DPC points, but again, they struggle in the LANs. They go 2-2-3 in the group stage, and they lose their only match on the main event in the lower bracket, going finishing 9th to 12th place, 0 DPC points. And on top of all the points they've earned here, they would lose 98 when they parted ways with Jerax. So taking a look now at their results against other teams attending TI11, in which there were 74 total games, where they went 39-35, so just a little bit above 50%, which seems to be the average for a lot of these teams attending this year's International. In Tour 1, we see that rough loss to Wildcard, where they go 0-2, but then follow that with a whole bunch of wins against Nouns, TSM FTX, and Sonics. But then in that tiebreaker match for second place, they would lose to TSM FTX 2-0. And again, all of these matches here are including teams in the last chance qualifiers, which is why we have both Nouns and Wildcard included. And in the regional finals, again, they would start off with a loss 2-0 to TSM FTX, a team that has been giving them fits at this point, but they would get that rematch in the grand finals, where they would almost win. They were up 2-1 on them in the series, but they would end up dropping the series 3-2 for TSM FTX. But they did drop Nouns and Sonics along the way. And for Sonics, that was a pretty big disappointment, because they had such a fantastic first tour, and they end up finishing third place, which doesn't feel all that great. So heading into Tour 2, a lot of wins here for Evil Geniuses, kicking things off with a win over Wildcard, Nouns, and Sonics. They would then lose to TSM FTX again 2-1. So again, that's 4 series losses in a row now to TSM FTX, including a best of 5. But they would get the best of them in the tiebreakers, where they would win against Sonics and TSM 1-0 there to secure the first place in the division. However, again, looking at Stockholm now, a loss to Tundra, a loss to T1, tie against Boom, but another loss to Bet Boom, a loss to OG, and then a tie to Beast Coast. And they would get eliminated right there with only 2 wins out of 12 games. So very, very bad for them there. Tour 3, they would actually start off with a loss to Nouns, and this was just after the roster changes with Jerax, so it looked like maybe EG was taking a step back, but to their credit, Nouns played very well in that series, and EG would in fact end up turning around really quickly, following that with 6 straight series wins, taking down Wildcard, TSM, Sonics on the way, and then in those tiebreakers, they would get the revenge on Nouns with a 1-0 series win, and they would take down Sonics as well. And heading into Arlington, they would lose to Aster and Boom in the group stage. They would take down Team Spirit, which must have felt pretty good, but only for a little bit, since they were heading into Beast Coast and Tundra, who they would tie. They take down Navi, but then they lose to Entity twice in a row. First in the group stage, and second in the lower bracket of the main stage, where they would lose 2-1, and that would be their final series of the DPC season. Lucky for them, they didn't get caught up to in points. They were very close to getting caught up to. I think VP was just about 30 points behind Evil Geniuses, so if they had a little bit of a better run at any point during the season, they could have gotten surpassed, but luckily for them, they qualify. Taking a look at some stats now for Evil Geniuses, they played a total of 93 DPC matches throughout this past year, in which they went 55-38. On Radiant, they were 25-16, and on Dire, they were 30-22. So pretty positive win rates for both sides there. It didn't really seem to matter. However, on Last Pick, they did have a much higher win rate, where they went 32-19 as opposed to the 23-19 on First Pick. And on Radiant First Pick, they went 18-13. Radiant Second Pick, 7-3. On Dire Last Pick, they were actually below 50%, although it's a small sample size. They go 5-6. And on Dire Last Pick, they go 25-16. So you can see very clearly which orientations Evil Geniuses was going for. Either they were going clearly for Radiant Radiant first pick or Dire last pick, given that Radiant second pick and Dire first pick have very few matches there, just a combined 21 matches out of 93. For average, for games that were less than 40 minutes, they were 39 and 24, and for games that were longer than 40 minutes, they were 17 and 14. So as games went on, that win rate started to come down a little bit. In game ones, they were 30 and 14, which is a very, very high win rate, 68%. In game twos, that does come down quite a bit, where they go 22 and 18. And in game threes, they were an even 4 and 4 for a 50% win rate. Their average GPM was 22.45, average XPM 26.32, and average KDA of 4.0, which has been on the higher side of the teams we've been previewing so far, and an average match duration of 36 minutes and 18 seconds. And finally, wrapping things off with some hero stats. Their most picked hero of the year has been Puck with 22. They picked a total of 92 different heroes, by the way, this past year. Tusk with 19, Snapfire with 18, Storm Spirit with 16, so there you go, you got 2 Abed heroes in the most picked for a total of 38 games already. Mars with 14, and then Razor, Terrorblade, and Enchantress with 13 games each. For their best heroes, Viper was 10 and 2. That hero has just recently got some nerfs, so I'd be surprised if we see as much of it from Evil Geniuses, but who knows? Following that, for the best hero, we have Dazzle went 8 and 1. Medusa and Marcy go 7 and 1 each. Bane goes 8 and 2, and OD goes 4 and 0. OD again, even though that hero is 4 and 0 with this, I'd be very surprised if we see any OD at TI at all. That hero feels very, very bad right now. For worst heroes, we have Nature's Prophet, 1 and 6. Yeah, it's not really been one of EG's best, and that's not necessarily just a Nightfall hero. Arteezy has played quite a bit of NP, and if I remember correctly, I think he played some in the grand finals against TSM as well, in the regional finals, but it didn't work out very well for this team. Grimstroke goes 1 and 4, and Timbersaw and CK go 2 and 5. And for their most banned, they banned a total of 92 different heroes, so almost 1 new hero a game. Timbersaw with 39 bans, very, very high. They really want to make sure that Arteezy has a good game. And of course, Timbersaw was pretty good near the start of the year. He has gone through some pretty hefty nerfs over time. Beastmaster with 26, and CK and Weaver with 23. So, Evil Geniuses, TI11. This has certainly been a different season for them, so at least it's not feeling like deja vu where they're coming in as one of the favorites. I think a lot of people would say that Evil Geniuses is almost expected to underperform at TI given their past few results, given their results at LANs this past year. But who knows, maybe this is something that could be a little bit refreshing for a team that has been considered a favorite for a few years now. These roster changes that they had over the past year, specifically with Jerax, didn't work out. They bring back Fly. So overall, this is the exact same roster as last year, other than Ice not playing on position 3. So is that the difference maker? On paper, I would say no. Ice, I think, was by far their most valuable asset last year. He was just able to play pretty much anything in the offlane, and especially in a year where Nature's Prophet, Timbersaw, and Broodmother were some of the most popular offlane heroes. It felt really, really good having a player like Ice on your team, but thankfully we haven't really had a whole lot this year. And Nightfall, despite the fact that he's not an Ice, he's still a fantastic player, and who knows, maybe his playstyle will fit with Evil Geniuses in this upcoming TI a little bit better. Again, we'll see how they end up doing now that they're not maybe favorites by a lot of people, but regardless, it should be very exciting to see how North America's sweetheart will end up doing at this year's International. So thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. As always, where do you think Evil Geniuses will place in this year's International? Do you think that they're bound for another flunk out in the group stage, just like at Stockholm, or are they bound for a deep run all the way to the grand finals, the first time any of these players will have made it that far? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be posting my next preview, which will be on Gaming Gladiators, very shortly. Bye.